Good morning, students. In today's class, we're going to discuss the three literary terms rhythm, hyperbole, and pun. All those students of first year literature who are watching these videos, let me tell you one thing. In first year, we have two papers. Paper 1 comprises of poetry and drama, along with literary history and literary terms. In paper 2, we have essays, short stories, and a novel. So we have started with literary terms, which is there in paper 1. If you go through my earlier videos, you will notice that I have discussed the two ages that have been prescribed in your syllabus, Elizabethan age and the neoclassical age. These two ages are important because the poets of these two ages have been picked up in your syllabus and their poems have been included in the syllabus for detailed discussion. Literary terms are the terms which are used in poems, and the understanding of these literary terms is essential and mandatory for the understanding of the poem. My above classes, the earlier classes have covered all the literary terms, and in this last class I will be covering with the three literary terms that have been left: hyperbole, pun, and rhythm. So let me take the three literary terms first, and tomorrow's class I shall give you the recap of the literary history and the literary terms that we have taken before we move on to poems or short stories. The first term that needs explanation is hyperbole, and along with hyperbole we take understatement. The figure of speech called hyperbole, Greek for overshooting, is bold overstatement or extravagant exaggeration of fact, used either for serious or comic effect. Iago says gloatingly of Othello in Act 3, Section 3. Not poppy, not madrona, not all the drowsy syrups of the world shall ever medicine thee to that sweet sleep which thou owest yesterday. See also Ben Jonson's gallantly hyperbolic compliments to his lady in Drink to me only with thine eyes, and the ironic hyperboles into his coy mistress, by which Marvel attests how slow his vegetable love should grow if he had but whirled enough in time. The tall talk and tall tale of the American West is a form of copying hyperbole. There is the story of a cowboy in an Eastern restaurant who orders a steak well done. Do you call this well done? He roared at the waitress. I have seen critters hers worse than that get well. The contrary figure, the opposite of hyperbole, is understatement, and the Greek term is meiosis, lessening, which deliberately represents something as much less in magnitude or importance than it really is. If we are to understand it in simple English, hyperbole is the exaggeration, elaboration, or in other words, using the term of the book, we can say it is overshooting. And understatement is lessening, making it less, and showing it in a lower thing. The effect is usually ironic, savagely ironic, and swifts a tale of a tub. Last week I saw a woman flate, and you would hardly believe how much it altered her person for the worse. And comically ironic in Mark Twain's comments, the reports of my death are greatly exaggerated. We can say that some critics extend meiosis to the use in literature of an utterly simple, unempathetic statement to enhance the effect of a pathetic or tragic event. An example is the line at the close of the narrative in Wordsworth's Michael, and never lifted up a single stone. A special form of understatement is litetos, Greek for plain or simple, which is the assertion of an affirmative by negating its contrary. He is not the brightest man in the world, meaning he is stupid. The figure is frequent in Anglo-Saxon poetry. In Beowulf, after Hrothgar has described the ghastly mere where dwells the monster Grendel, he comments, that is not a pleasant place. So students, hyperbole is exaggeration, overshooting, and understatement is lessening. Let us take the second literary term, pun. What do you mean by pun? A play on words that are either identical in sounds, homonyms, or similar in sound but are sharply diverse in meaning. Puns have had serious literary uses. The authority of the Pope goes back to the Greek pun in Matthew, Thou art Peter, Petros, and upon this rock, Petra, I will build my church. Shakespeare used puns seriously as well as for comic purposes. So in Romeo and Juliet, Mercutio, bleeding to death, says, "Ask for me tomorrow, and you shall find me a grave man." Grave refers to serious, but here it also refers to the place of burial. And John Donne's solemn hymn to God the Father puns throughout on his own name and the verb done. In the 8th century and thereafter, however, the literary use of the pun had been almost exclusively comic. The great exception is James Joyce's Finnegan's Wake, which exploits puns throughout in order to help sustain its complex effect, at once serious and comic of multiple levels of meaning. A special type of pun known as the equivoque is the use of a single word or phrase which has two disparate meanings in a context which makes both meaning equally relevant. An example is the epitaph suggested for a bank teller. He checked his cash, cashed in his checks, and left his window. Who is next? So we can describe pun as a play on words. Now let us take the last literary term, that is rhythm. If we have to understand rhythm, we have to understand what meter is. Meter plays a very important role in English and especially in poems. Let us take what meter is. In all sustained spoken English, we feel a rhythm, in the sense of a recognizable though variable pattern in the beat of the stresses in the stream of sound. If this rhythm is structured into a recurrence of regular, that is, approximately equal units, we call it meter. Composition written in meter are known as verse. There is a considerable dispute about the way to analyze and classify English meters. This article will present a traditional stress and syllable analysis which has the virtue of being simple, widely accepted and applicable to by far the greatest part of English versification from Chaucer to the present day. Some major departures from the stress and syllable meter will be described at the end. The meter of a line or verse is determined by the pattern of stronger and weaker stresses in its component syllables. Whatever the ear detects as a strong stress is not an absolute quantity, but is related to the degree of stress in the adjacent syllables. The degree of perceived stress is determined primarily by the relative loudness of the pronunciation of the syllable, and to a lesser extent by its relative pitch and duration. There are three factors that determine where the stress will fall in a line of verse. Most important is the word accent in the polysyllable words in the noun accent itself. For example, the stress falls on the first syllable, accent. There are also many monosyllabic words in the language, and on which of these in a sentence or a phrase the stress will fall depends on the grammatical function of the word. Another detriment of stress is the metrical accent, which is an expected pulsation in accordance with the stress pattern which was established earlier in the metrical line or passage. If the metrical accent enforces an alteration of the normal word accent, we get a rent accent. Wrenching may be the result of a lack of metrical skills. It is possible to distinguish various degrees of relative stress in English speech, but the most common and generally used fashion of analyzing and classifying the standard English meters is to distinguish only two categories of stress in syllable, weak stress and strong stress, and to group the syllables into metric feet according to the patterning of these two stresses. A foot is a combination of a strong stress and the associated weak stress or stresses which make up the recurrent metric unit of a line. The relatively strong stress syllable is called for short stress. The relatively weaker stress syllables are called light or slack or simply unstressed. The four standard feet distinguished in English are iambic, the noun is iamb, anapaestic, dactylic, spondaic, pyrrhic, and we have 8 feet lines. Monometer is 1 foot, diameter is 2 feet, trimeter is 3 feet, tetrameter is 4 feet, pentameter is 5 feet, hexameter is 6, heptameter is 7, and octameter is 8. So students, this was the explanation of the three literary terms, rhythm, hyperbole, and pun. With these three literary terms, we finished with the literary terms topic. Tomorrow we are going to take a recap of the literary history that we have done and the literary terms that we have covered. Thank you.